What brought you into evolutionary astrology?
My love of the human psyche. I mean, I had looked into, so I always say, when I was in like, I don't know, early high school, maybe late grammar school, I got that Everything You Need to Know About Astrology book, right? And hand drew charts. And I mean, I was always fascinated with what made people tick at the very deepest levels. And so, to me, astrology, there was a huge, just astrology in general, there was a huge awakening for me, even in that early formative time of my life, that stopped me from judging people. We all sometimes have a dialogue going on, meet somebody, and you put them into a category. And that all of a sudden it was like a light bulb went off that was like everybody's chart is just a perfect constellation that's all part of a plan that is a plan for them to discover and a plan to look at and have them be revealed. So anyway, that was my love, my passion was there. And then when I was living in Germany, I found the Pluto books. That was whatever that was, 90s, 88, 7, whatever. Um, and I found the Pluto books, and I said, now this is the only astrology book you'll ever need, because by that time I had, already started to be involved in hands-on healing and shamanic work, and starting to get into regression work. And that is very directly involved in the dynamics of the soul, right? And the soul through many lifetimes. And when I read Jeffrey's Pluto book, I said, this is it for me. Um, and it became that like as I was also studying regression and then developing in that work, it was like peanut butter and chocolate, that made a Reese's cup. It was just the perfect marriage.
Wonderful. And Laura, I mean, what brought you into evolutionary astrology? That's kind of a hard question to ask you with your
It is.
background.
It is because mom opened the bookstore when I was 16. I wasn't, when I was 16, I wasn't interested in astrology. My mother had started studying when I was 6 years old. It was around me, but I wasn't really paying any attention to it. And so she wanted to open her bookstore. And so she did in the summer of 75. And I started reading metaphysical books that were in the bookstore, found those very interesting. Uh, Took my first class when I was 16, but it was math and I wasn't as interested. Then it was summer. We wanted to do math in the summer. Let's go. I wanted to do other things. And so uh, I left the bookstore in 78, 79, and went out into the world and worked, and then came back in 83 to be the manager of the bookstore. I have no memory of wanting to do astrology. I there's I mean I never did. It was just not something. It was what mom did. Jeffrey was in the store. That's the way it went. So I was going to manage the bookstore. I was good at managing things. That's what I'll do. But then I realized, you know what? If I'm going to manage astrology bookstore, shouldn't I know something about the topic? So if somebody comes in and asks me some random question about where they can find a book on, sesquiquadrats or progressions, and I didn't even know what those things were, then what was the point? So I started studying astrology, and the thing is when I started studying astrology, the only astrology was evolutionary astrology. That's where I started. I,
Hmm.
I, I didn't start with anything else, right? I started in 83, 84. Jeffrey was writing his book at that time. He had developed the materials in the 70s and really started bringing them out in the later 70s, teaching the material at our bookstore. So I started there. I quit pretty quickly because archetypes and symbols were not a language that I understood. Numbers, math in a linear way, keeping things organized was where my brain was at. So I quit, and uh, mom was, like, well, okay, if that's the way you feel about it. And then she just kind of nudge a little bit in Maggie's way and kind of drop some hints, and I would go back. So the second time, I got a little further and then quit again. Um, Memorizing things, real strong point. But being able to synthesize symbols, archetypes, I felt dumb. So I quit. And then at some point, I gave it a third try. Don't know why. I just thought, okay, I'll try again. And so I went back to it. And somehow the third try, something clicked in my brain. Just something clicked. And I think it was really my right brain opening because it wasn't very open prior to that. Really, just very much a left brain thinker. And so the more I worked with the archetypes and the more I meditated, which was what Jeffrey really pushed all of us to do, and I really took it to heart, was to go home and meditate on the archetypes and meditate on my chart. And it was through that process that things began to really open up. And then I began a study group and I worked with it a lot. And it just, frankly, it's been the only astrology I've ever done. Not that I haven't studied other or looked into other methodologies, always curious, always looking, and looking for techniques that I can bring back to what I'm doing in evolutionary astrology. Um, but as my husband would say, I was the reluctant astrologer because I kept trying to walk away from it. And even after studying it, I tried to walk away from the bookstore and walk away from it. And the universe wasn't having it. It just wasn't. It just kept shoving me back over literally everywhere in my life. Cars were pushing me off the road. People were running into me, pushing me. The universe was pushing me. And I wasn't sure what they were trying to get at, but eventually I did get it. And so there wasn't any direct soul call that I recognized as a soul call. It is the path that apparently I was meant to walk. And that's how I got here. I fell in love with it. Not that once the start of it was because I thought I should, and the continuation of it was because I loved it. And though I thought I was doing something for grounded and practical reasons, and that was smart in its own way, I did come out with skills. And the greatest gift of all was the path to my own self knowing. You can't get any better than that. True gift.
That's that all Pluto attraction resistance, attraction resistance.
Well, Jeffrey himself was a reluctant astrologer, and he talked about that a lot all the time.
He certainly did.
So, how
He
about you,
certainly did.
Rose? Where did you start?
Well, I think that born to do this is probably accurate. When I was a child at home, I used to sit at my desk that I was very proud of. My parents bought me in my room, and I used to get paper and I used to draw what I thought were hieroglyphics on paper, but realized later that I was trying to draw the glyphs, right? Yeah.
Oh,
And I started studying at the age of 16. It's when I left home and I was lost and troubled and looking for answers. And I thought astrology had them. So I was naturally gravitating towards that my whole life. And of course, my life veered this way and that, with, various things that I did in my life. But I did come to a turning point at one point, and really, it was the dividing moment here when I met Jeffrey. He was a bookstore here that I used to frequent, and they had used books, and they were cheap, and you could sit there, and they had, benches that you could sit and read, and I would do that, and I would buy every single astrology book that there was. The only book that I didn't take home with me was Pluto, which I picked up off the shelf a batch of times and went, oh, wait a minute, too much for me. I can't do it right. I can't do it right now. And then at one point, somebody gave me a tape, and that tape said, "Oh, you don't know this guy, Jeffrey Green? Here, check out this lecture." And I was in my car, and I was going to put the cassette in the little thing and go someplace and listen to this tape, and I never made it out of the driveway. His voice to me just went boom, and it just resonated right with my soul. And before that, all the years that I spent in astrology, from my teen years to my mid 30s, actually, and I looked at all kinds of branches of astrology, and I even registered with the Faculty of Astrological Studies in England and did a year with them as well too. I did all kinds of things, but when I met Jeffrey, my soul just lit up like a Christmas tree, and he spoke truth, and he knew me, and I knew him, and I knew that this was always going to be truth for me. I could rely on this body of information to understand myself. And I was always from childhood, in touch with other realms. I've always known that there were other realities, other lives, I was always in touch with all of that. So this um, gave me the explanation, the insight, the understanding, the trust to move forward in my life, and to have the courage to really be with myself, and to stand on my own path, and to carry on. You know? So
But I'd like to ask you, both of you, what specific things, or even in general, did you get from evolutionary astrology for your lives? Like what bomb dropped, or revelation, or realization, or guidance, or
It was the beginning path of really my self-development. It gave a framework, right? So I started studying in 83. I finished the core of my studies. I took a long time doubling back, but I finished the core of my studies probably 88, 89. Um, Jeffrey leaves the bookstore, moves on, um, and I step in to become an astrologer there in the bookstore. But I have to say, at that time, that was my Saturn return, 87, 88, 89, as 27, 28, and 27, 28, 20, and 30 in there. And hard to say whether, chicken the egg sort of thing. Was it that I had been studying astrology that cracked something that opened up? Did something open up and now I had a framework in which to hold it? I mean, it's kind of hard to tell which one came first, right? They were synchronistically happening, and an enormous amount of past life trauma, uh, burst forth, oozed out, dreams, waking visions, all kinds of things were happening that without that, and the people around me, like Jeffrey and my mom, I wouldn't have really known what to do with it, because what was happening is that there was an awakening that was happening, and my linear brain was having a hard time keeping up. And there was a crack that was happening, right? There was a schism that was happening as this growth was occurring and all this stuff was coming forward. And evolutionary astrology described it perfectly. It was the language that helped me understand. First of all, wasn't crazy, experiencing the things that I experienced, but they are explained quite explicitly by my natal chart and the soul's where the soul has been, my soul has come from, the experiences that it's had, and then necessitating or describing the lessons forward and what my soul was meant to work on and grow through. And so, um, is there a specific thing? I don't know. It's me. It's like that's the thing. That's what I
Well, it
got.
sounds like it was a way of, it's interesting. Jung, when Jung was being taken apart during his Red Book journey, which went on for years, he used mandalas and also astrology. But the circle, the mandala, he looked at as a way to orient and reassemble his psyche that was kind of being ripped apart. And like you've talked about, and I know I've been through a similar experience of that volcanic eruption of, content from other lives or, deeply buried traumas that aren't from this life erupting into one psyche. But interesting that the chart, right, is a circle. It's kind of like a mandala. So,
Oh,
and
it
you
is.
talk about it in that context where it helped you, kind of reassemble, reflect, and have a container for what you were going through at the time.
No, I agree with you, and absolutely, an astrology chart is a mandala. So, uh,
Yeah.
but I think that there isn't any specific one thing, um, except what I've evolved to. You know.
Yeah, I think for me, gosh, well, there's could be a lot, but I keep thinking, well, one thing I learned immediately was that I was born neurotic, um, because I'm a Pluto Virgo in the sixth house, and and that made a lot of sense to me. All of the Virgo complexes, I came in with spades because it's a kind of double signature. Uh, and certainly through personal work and regression and all of that, I don't really have a lot of that neuroses anymore. But again, just to see that externalized almost, right? To look and go, it's like if you have some ailment that you don't know, you're swimming in it and nobody ever diagnoses it. And then, there it is, there's the answer. And you go, oh, now I can do something with that,
Yeah.
right? And to me, that was how, for me, evolutionary astrology was very prescriptive in that sense of being able to look at something to externalize the inner world. And to me, the intimate connection between the inner and the outer is central in my life. I think like it would be for all of us. And another thing I want to say about astrology in general, I just think it's such a noble profession because I think, and I've said this before, but I think, society just collectively gets more and more estranged from each other, from nature, from anything, from ourselves, right? We're estranged, we're just distracted and so on. And in its very basic sense, right? To sit with somebody or even yourself, right? Look at a chart and know that this is a cosmic map, plan. It's an immediate thunk of belonging to the cosmos and a cosmos that you're intimately connected with. And I can't think of anything more noble, right? To be able to do that for ourselves or others. So for me, it answered that very deep part of longing for connectedness and then kind of having the proof. There it is, right? It's happening. It's happening to me. It's happening to everybody. Um,
Yeah.
and certainly the level that evolutionary astrology comes from, which where it isn't predictive, or uses astrology in that way so much as it illuminates these dynamics that you just may not be aware of about. You're living them, right? And when we're living something, we think that is the way it is until, right, you look at it and go, I mean, I can tell you my first reading with Jeffrey, this is hysterical. He said to me, your soul created maximum freedom in this lifetime. And if you saw my chart, and as I understand it now, I didn't then, it would make sense. But at the time, I was so bound by Saturn conjunct my south node and my Pluto Virgo in the sixth, right? And this is, going back 30 years. I was so kind of in that kind of restrictive way of thinking of the shoulds and the musts and the, not being good enough and blah, and all that stuff. Um, and I remember when he said that to me, I remember thinking, I wonder if he's looking at my chart. Is that my chart? Right? But here I am years later, and certainly as gone through, healing processes, etc., and realized more of my evolutionary potential as my chart would describe, it absolutely bang on.
Yeah. What's
Rose?
your, yes, what's your
Well,
takeaway?
for me, I have a Moon Saturn balsamic conjunction, and so I felt my life to be, a series of destined events, and a very fated. I was very aware when I was in relationship, the potency, the something from the past here that I was working through. So I was very aware of all of that. I'm an Aquarius rising. I always felt fundamentally different than everybody else. And I always had this sense of having an alignment with God, despite the fact that, I felt so fundamentally different than everyone else, but I always had that sense about it. So um, in my life, when I was married, my husband and I had gone from, as I say, starving artist to fame and fortune almost overnight, right? Um, and there was all this, abundance in the world, but I was never really chasing any of that, right? And life just got really big and really, really crazy. And I snapped at one point saying, at that point, art had no soul. I was looking for purpose, right? What I was doing, creating this life and creating all of that, I'm Pluto and Leo, so there's lots of creative stuff there, but it didn't make any sense to me. And this was at the time that I met up with Jeffrey, and he put me on my path, and he was really my strongest advocate for pushing and shoving me to professional astrology, really. Um, but that's where I found purpose. That's where I found purpose. That was at the time when my progressed Mars stationed retrograde. And I completely changed my entire life. Although, as I said, from the age of 16, I was searching through astrology for answers. But it was really the soul calling and the desire to be of purpose that was really where the evolutionary astrology, grabbed hold of me. Besides, of course, what we all do is the deeper look that we do into ourselves to understand, why am I built this way? Why have I made these choices in life? Why have I put myself on the line in the way that I have, which I did throughout my life. So, purpose, understanding, depth, the awareness that I have through the study, through the living with this philosophy, this belief, this vocation, this spiritual path, has allowed me to perceive the world around me in a much broader, much deeper, much more holistic, and less judgmental way, and that's a really important point when you understand, um, the this material, you become less judgmental, of others and of yourself as well, right?
Absolutely. That's the thing that I had said that everybody is their own perfect little constellation and it's all meant to be.
All meant to be.
And there's the one word you use that is so indicative of the raison d'etre of evolutionary astrology is why.
Right.
Why do we react to certain things? Why do we keep attracting the same people or seemingly the same dynamics over and over again? Why do I have the problems with one or more of my parents or one or more of my siblings? Why do I constantly put myself in a job that I hate? Or, any of a million zillion questions that we ask as humans. Why? And evolutionary astrology is perfectly designed to answer that question in a way that's satisfying. That's the thing.
Well, I mean, it's like when Rose talked about that thunk where, we all know that feeling of like when truth is spoken, different people have different reactions, but it is like that, right? When it perfectly elucidates some dynamic that has been controlling a person. And when you're in it, and you don't know you're in it, right? You don't know you're in it, like a poverty complex or a whatever, inferiority complex. You don't know because you think that's just it. And then somebody comes along and they give you these reasons, this understanding of why that might have formed, why you're carrying that, what you might be able to do with it in this lifetime, that your soul is really desiring this evolution beyond a particular thing. And here's the map, here's the prescription, right? I mean, that's so profound. Okay, so wow, this is really great. I think it's really great to you know, explore our journeys together, and so people understand that we have a real vested interest in what we do. It's just our passion, and it's really great to share that. And thank you for taking the time to listen and to share.
I think that's the really important point, is that we are all very passionate about supporting those who want to study with us to proficiency, to understanding what this body of work has to offer, and supporting each person in their own personal journey. So, thank you for coming along with us.